Good evening. Decatur Parents Network welcomes you to our second webinar in the series Parenting During a Pandemic. The Decatur Parents Network is a community of parents, caregivers, guardians, friends, grandparents, all those who are working together to promote a nurturing environment that encourages our children to make safe and smart choices. Our mission is to empower families by fostering communication amongst parents. We want you to know that this is a volunteer community of parents and caregivers and all those friends that started as an outreach out of the Decatur High School PTA. We don't ask for dues, membership fees, we don't solicit donations. We strive to be non-judgmental and we really seek to explore as many points of view regarding best ways to parent and best ways to do that together as a community. So thank you for joining us. We think you're willing to partner with us. Thank you. In a second, you're going to join our April 30th webinar in progress. I was the technician that evening and I neglected to hit record at the right moment. So let me tell you a little bit about what you miss because you're going to jump into a recording in progress. What you're going to have missed is our Decatur Parents Network leadership team member, Peter Pliszka, who is going to be the moderator for the evening. He takes just a moment to vaguely or basically introduce our three panelists for the evening. So you missed that little bit. So it's our panelists are going to be Jen Young from the Decatur Dekalb YMCA, Ragan Hudson from Renfroe Middle School, and Teresa Wright Johnson, who tonight is representing the Dekalb Community Service Board. So you'll miss Jen Young introducing herself. She goes into a little bit more detail about her role as the Director of Youth Development at the Decatur Dekalb YMCA. So my apologies that you missed that. And so the video starts with Ragan Hudson partially through her introduction. And Ragan is a school counselor at Renfroe Middle School. Following that, you will get the introduction of Teresa Wright Johnson. So we have these three fabulous qualified panelists joining us tonight on this webinar. We hope you, the community, will find value in their wisdom and experience. So next you'll see that recording start in process.
And it's not so different now actually for me, but certainly academic achievement, social emotional development, career development. I always want to say this so that you know what my lens is. My lens is always access, equity, and social justice, and that's interwoven through all my work. Lately, my role has been lots of individual support with students. We talk a lot about coping strategies, organizational support, self-advocacy. I run a couple of groups a week now during this pandemic. They're virtual groups, obviously. I call them Hudson's Hallway Chats. They're just a way to kind of hang out and have conversations that we normally might have in the hallway at school. And I've really enjoyed those. I've done a lot. I do a lot of go between the teachers, advocacy work between teachers and students, and making sure that needs are met. And I always support families, and so I'm getting a lot of parents reaching out, asking for support around how do I, help my kids during this new virtual learning environment. So I've been doing a lot of that.
Great. So
Happy
Ragan, you could, great. So you can be, if people have questions that relate specifically to City Schools of Decatur connection, you would be the target for that.
Right. And if I can't answer that, I know Dr. Huddleston will. So
yeah,
yes.
Good. Okay. Thank you for being here. Teresa.
Hi. You guys can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, so I'm Teresa Wright Johnson, and I'm actually a parent peer specialist. And what that is a parent that has lived experience and training with working with children that either have a mental health diagnosis or explaining what mental health diagnoses are or mental health. Also, I'm a mental health instructor, but I have a myriad of things I do. But today I am here for the Dekalb Community Service Board. I'm the parent peer specialist for the Dekalb Community Service Board, and we provide mental health services for individuals 4 years old to seniors. And, one of our locations is right here in Decatur over on Windway. We have about 4 locations throughout DeKalb County. And I help parents mostly with coping skills, understanding diagnosis, parent education, parent training, parent support, and understanding where resources and supports are within our lovely DeKalb County.
Beautiful, beautiful. Great, thank you. You're our parent expert tonight. So I appreciate you being here. So our first question is, we're about 2 months into shutdown. And so we're all taking a journey of some kind over the 2 months. So with the people that you serve, the people that you talk to, where do you see that they have changed? In what direction have they gone? Or what's different about this week than it was 2 months ago? Ragan, why don't you start us out?
Okay. I think we're all still trying to figure out how we've changed. I've heard the analogy used, and I agree with it, that we are it's like we're in the air in an airplane still trying to build it, right? We're trying to build the airplane while it's in flight. And I think that's where we are right now, trying to figure out how have things changed and how have we changed, how our perspectives changed. And I think in a lot of ways, we are seeing each other with new eyes in many cases, and I can give some examples of that. I would say for parents with children with special needs, with either an IEP or a 504, or maybe it's a distinct social emotional need, I'm seeing in many cases that parents are seeing their children with these new eyes, and they're seeing these needs that are heightened at home. I have parents asking me, how do I support my child with ADHD, with Tourette's syndrome, with anxiety? How do I give the right level of support without causing a conflict between me and my child, without causing a meltdown or a shutdown where I can't get in at all? And there are some fears about when we go back to school, how will it be for my child and how will it be for me after this extended period at home and supporting my child at home? I have kids on another plane that are, kids that had were experiencing heightened anxiety at school when we were there all together. And this period of time at home has provided them with some relief, quite frankly. They're much happier in some cases. The calmer, being able to be at home, they feel calmer, they feel like they have more control over their environment, and virtual learning can sometimes lend us that. I've seen and heard of a deepened or new and sometimes appreciation for educators and for teachers. Kids that are telling me, I really want to go back to school. I want to be back at school. I want my teachers' support. I want them to be in the classroom with me. I need that and want that support. They long for the community that they find in our schools. And so, there's a lot of, I think we're in a bunch of different boats, right? But those are the things I'm hearing in general, like how our eyes are being opened and we're seeing things from maybe a different perspective or point of view than we did before this.
Okay, so you see the change has been people finding, maybe reflecting on their orientation to the world that they're used to, whether it's I miss it or I'm relieved by being away from it. But you see them reflecting on, having time to reflect on the place that they left.
Yes, and in a lot of cases, just having a different appreciation of that or a different understanding of that than they did before.
I got you. So Teresa, you work with parents. So what has 2 months? What have they done where have they gone in 2 months in their mindset and in their, kind of how they approach their daily life? What's the
So
evolution?
they've gone from, I don't think I can do this for 2 weeks, and now we're at the rest of the school year. So many parents, one, are not used to being with their children as long. So they're sometimes a bit frustrated, but also they're nervous. It's something different for them, just like it's a different change for the kids to be at home all the time. It's a different change for us to be at home, as parents. And so a lot of them they're using what coping skills they have. And they may not have a lot of coping skills. They may need patience. I'm talking to a lot of parents, especially, let's just imagine parents that have children, like the only child. And so now they're becoming their playmates. And I'm teaching them like, hey, yeah, you have to take out a little bit more floor time for them. Or maybe it's a teenager. I've talked to moms, single, married, all kinds of moms that are trying to figure out how to connect with their teenage and middle school children. Like, hey, go ask them when they're not doing their schoolwork, can you play a game with them? And one of my parents did that last week. And she walked into her son is in the last year of middle school. And she walked in and she said, hey, such and such, I want to play a game with you because my job is all about teaching them how to interact with their children and parents. And she said he turned around and looked at her like, what are you talking about? And like, why are you wanting to play a game? But I talked to that parent again today because I follow up with them at the Dekalb Community Service Board. The service that I offer is a service that comes with their insurance. And so I followed up with her today and I said, hey, what have you been doing in regards to coping skills and parenting? She said, we've been playing games. I said, what kind of games? And she said, board games like Scrabble, blah, blah, blah. I said, did you get a chance to play the game with your child? And she said, sure, a little bit. So one, teaching them how to interact with their child outside of the regular school schedule. Because just be honest with ourselves, many of us, I know I go to work, get my daughter from school, band practice, we get them in, we feed them, they do their homework, we get our clothes together, blah, blah, blah. Now you have all this other time you have to fill. And a lot of parents either don't know how to fill it or might have a teenager like me, I have a 9th grader myself, where she might be into her technology so much, they don't want to disturb their child, but they also know somewhat, not everybody knows that screen time is not a great thing. And then everybody has a different understanding of screen time. So trying to get parents to decide what a good balance is based on who their child is and not building into your child's anxiety, but we talk a lot about breaks. So that's what I've been seeing parents, a lot of them are really dealing with a lot of anxiety themselves as well.
So
because now we're at home.
So do I hear you saying that they're, they're reacting to something that they're unfamiliar with, and they're having sustained pressure or sustained responsibility with their kids. Are they developing a rhythm of that? It sounds like some of them are.
Yes, some of them are. I talked to one mom and it was really cool because she has 2 children. Both of them have 504s or IEPs, which is very interesting. And she, when I talked to her before, she was everywhere. Now she has a schedule. And she said, oh, they're having their PE time right now. And she told me about the yoga and the interactive things they're doing. And then she told me about snack time. Then she told me about, she had a story time. And she even had a break time for them, which was like their break time and her rest time, because this was a mom that is working while the kids are also at home as well. So some of them are getting into the groove of things, and some of them are getting to know their children a lot better. So now they're actually able to see a little bit more of who their child is, and they're actually building relationships. Similar to what Ragan said, some of our children needed that break, and quite honestly, some of us as parents needed that break to like live in our house, to do some laundry. And the kids the same way, they're actually in their bedroom. They're not being shuttled around in the car all the time. So that's what I'm seeing for parents.
Okay, so you're seeing kind of sustained attention on things. So that's interesting. Jen, your group at the Y, the teams that you work with, how are they different 2 months down the road now? Or are they the same?
Well, I have a couple reference points. I mean, one being my teens, but something kind of emerged today in a very genuine conversation. A friend of mine who has 5 kids, she's now homeschooling 5 kids. on a system that's not her own. So whereas maybe a typical homeschool parent would have a schedule, set it up, maintain that, do a certain type of education tool that works for them and their child. This is now children in different classrooms, different teachers, times are overlapping, and she's managing like a very large schedule. So talking to her was very interesting today, because in the beginning she felt good, and today, it was really tough. And she's deciding, does my kindergartner really need this type of education right now? What fat can I cut out of this schedule so that we can lean up, I don't lose my mind, and my kids don't lose their mind with me. And so we kind of talked through that. And she said, I've been in touch with the principal about what is really the most important thing my child who's really on that younger spectrum, opposed to my older kids who can manage their schedule. So I found that conversation to be really interesting, because I think we're reaching that point where we recognize there's going to be learning loss. We recognize that whatever comes out of this won't be the same as it was before, and whatever that looks like. And I think that's kind of the conversation that's developing out of this stress and tension is, what is really necessary right now? What is really the most urgent thing that we should deal with to continue forward? And the rest will come out of this and figure out together.
Right.
Which was a different perspective than my teen group has. There's like 12 to 15 teens in a leadership program that I have. And typically what I'm teaching them is social emotional skills and leadership development, with the intention and goal that when they move on and they go to college, they have a very high success rate of retention in college, and a high success rate of coming out of college and having their first job and being successful at that as well. And a lot of that is developing coping skills, developing schedules, doing some of the things that they're getting tested on right now. So I've seen them kind of on a wave, some weeks are better than others. Some weeks we just can't take it. Some weeks we're feeling like, I'm on this new project, I have a passion, and then that kind of fizzles out and dies, and we're back on the train of the high and low. So
but do you think
that's really what I'm seeing out there.
For teams that are on a leadership in a leadership program, are they feeling a sense of? I think you said the word testing. Do they feel like they're getting some real world experience with their thoughts, because we're surrounded by so much stimuli around the limitations we have, the opportunities we have. So there's things in our conversations now that haven't been in our conversation just in 6 months ago. So do they feel like they're learning some life skills to pair with your leadership skills?
Yeah, I mean, I know Marnie, I believe Marnie is on this, and she and I could probably talk for days about coping and how important it is to teach kids coping skills so that they're successful adults. And I think something that my teens are realizing is they have a whole lot more freedom to do things around the house because of the stress that their parents are going through. So now mom and dad are like, you're cooking dinner, when normally mom and dad may not allow them to do that because they don't want to eat a crappy dinner or we're in a hurry. They're having time to be creative in the kitchen and have successes and failures, which we know they will need later in life. Or a project that they want to work on in their room. Sure, paint your room. Sounds like a great time to do it. So there are some wins, I think, coming out of it, that they're getting some more adult skills that they wouldn't normally get, especially my middle schoolers. They have a lot more say in their schedule too, which is very autonomous of them.
Yeah, I have an 18-year-old and a 13-year-old, and I'd say that they have found a different kind of independence that contributes to the household, whereas they like their independence outside the house because they do they have friends and things, and now they have I don't know if the word is independence, but they're seeing their connection to things as they happen by doing their laundry, by taking care of meals for themselves. So they're learning some tangible skills to sustain themselves as independent beings. So So we talked about, at the outset and in our conversations individually with you. So this is a time also of grief because, I'll share the grief my children have is that my son's a senior, so he will not have his end of year prom and graduation traditionally. My 8th grader will not have her 8th grade dance or capstone. And of course they don't see their friends. So there is a grief that they feel, whether they can articulate that or not. But I'd like each of you to talk about how do you give space to that without, I think Ragan had mentioned earlier, is how do you address something without it seeming like there's an expectation attached to it or it's another pressure you're putting on them. But what does space for grief for our children and parents look like? Ragan, do you want to?
Sure. So I think what I would like to say about that is that and if we're talking about our children, my students, I would say, or I call them my kids too. I think the best thing to do is try to, in any way possible, honor your child's core self. And maybe another way of saying that is let them take the lead on how, if they are grieving, how that grief looks. Because if you know anything about grief, we know that, we don't, there's all these, grief theory, right, with all these different levels that you go through when you grieve, right? But what we know more now is that you don't have to experience all those in a certain way. Like, we're not always at this level or this level, you know what I mean? And so we're all individuals, and our children are just younger versions of us, right? So I think you have to try to let them take the lead and honor who they are. So for example, you might have children who really kind of disengaged and need silence or quiet space to kind of be with themselves and work through that grief. So I can give you an example of that at my own house. I have 3 kids, and my 2 sons share a room, and my daughter has her own room, and my sons are 5.5 years apart. So my middle school son, I could tell with his behavior and everything that was going on, that he really needed some space. And we live in a little bungalow house. There isn't an extra space. And so what we ended up doing is I came to him and said, do you want to switch rooms with your sister for a little bit of time? Is that something that you think might help you have some of your own time and space?
Mm-hmm.
And so he did. So he's been sleeping in his sister's room, and my daughter is in with my youngest son. So that's an example of needing to kind of disengage and have physical space, by yourself. I think at some point we all, even introverts, I would argue, seek out connection somehow. So I think connection as a means to process grief is to be expected and actually very lovely. Is it physical connection? I've seen and read some things where kids, are starting to come back into their parents' bedrooms at night and want to get in bed with them and sleep with them for a while. Have you noticed that your kids are wanting to hold your hand more, or sit in your lap, even if it's not something, even if you think that they're too big or too old to do that anymore? That's physical connection, right? I sent out a survey the second week that we were home on quarantine to my students, my 6th grade students, and they told me, so I have a little over 500 students that I serve, and 382 responded to my survey, and I really was trying to figure out, like, what is it that you're struggling with right now, and what is it that you need? And over 70% of them said connection is the number one thing. I want to see my peers. I want to talk with them. I want to hang out with them. Like, what can I do?
Right.
Another way.
So that's them identifying some grief within themselves.
Yes, and I don't even know if they know that. They don't even know if they make the connection that it's grief, but they know that there's a need.
Yeah, gotcha.
I think some people process grief like creatively, or in a physical outlet or a creative outlet. So trying to make sure that we're creating opportunities for that if we're able to in our homes. Some kids want to talk and process. and they want to, is there someone in their life, a trusted adult, an older sibling, a favorite aunt, if it's not you as a parent, that they can talk to and process and talk about without being judged wherever they are. And then finally, I want to say, I think there's a real need for silliness and fun. And that might seem like counterintuitive when you're talking about grief, but I do think that laughter is probably the best medicine oftentimes. And it's okay to be grieving and be silly and have fun if you can create opportunities for that. It's that both and world. And I think I can speak for my middle schoolers. They live in a both and world every day. And so trying to find opportunities for that to process grief, I think, is important.
Great. So it's really reading the individual.
I think so. Yeah. I think it's letting them lead.
So you and Jen typically work with maybe younger people. Jen, you work with the teens, but Teresa, you work with adults. So their language around grief and language around their emotions, they do have a vocabulary for it. A lot of kids don't have a vocabulary for it yet at the early ages. So what, in your group, how is grief handled? Is it an opportunity for parents to not only self-reflect, but also begin to develop maybe some vocabulary? I mean, you don't want to scare kids, but between the parents, how are they processing it? Are they talking about it, or they have to have action too?
I think I want to talk a little bit with the grief. I also have to put that the anxiety is there. So what I'm finding with a lot of parents, the parents are anxious and have a lot of stress and grief because of maybe now they're working at home and next week they might have to go back to work, but their kids are still at home and they're going to have to bring, the world with them home. And what parents are generally doing in regards to grief, they're trying to keep their children busy, which is not always, sometimes not the best case, and sometimes keeping themselves still extremely busy, not dealing with it, not sitting down and talking about it. And I provided some resources later as well for you guys, to the parents and attendees to look at. But being able to just tell your children it's okay that you're upset and that you're grieving missing 8th grade dance or a graduation, because I have a madrid of women, not just from the Dekalb Community Service Board. Within my role with the Dekalb Community Service Board, I also work with the Federation of Families for Children's Mental Health as an executive director. And so I have all these support groups I run. And what I'm finding is a lot of parents, they're upset and they're grieving the loss of their children not being able to do those milestone things, right? Or they're grieving the loss that their children didn't have spring break. So what I'm talking to parents about is, hey, go online, here's some resources. This is how you tell them. This is, unfortunately, sometimes in life, we miss out on things or we don't have control of the world. And part of being a parent is teaching your children they're little human beings. We're here to support them to grow up, but we'll have to one day let them be released in the real world. So calmly and gently as you can, let them know, hey, this sucks for me too. Because I wanted to have my birthday party at a little place and have a good fun, but I couldn't do that. And the same for my daughter. So you have to create, like Ragan said, opportunities for them to still have fun, and then not overpromise or compensate. And I was sharing with Peter earlier today, my daughter's birthday was yesterday. She just turned 15. She goes to Drew Hill. She's very in the band. She's very active. She loves doing everything that she does. And about right when the quarantine happened, she said, Mommy, can I have my birthday party at a hotel this year? And da 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 da. And my heart wanted to say, sure, we can do that. But I said, no, I can't promise that right now, because right now the world is at a point where I don't know what's going to happen. And when I was telling Peter earlier, sometimes that's hard for us as parents, as adults, to say that we don't have control over this either. We have to be vulnerable, but we need to let our children see that sometimes, because they're going to have to make decisions and feel that kind of way. And I'm so glad I did tell her that, weeks ago, because guess what? We're the parents. We have foresight. So create something else for them. So children that are not having graduations at UC are now having virtual graduations. My daughter, we still had a birthday celebration yesterday. We had a distance drive-by to her friends. I called 5 of her closest friends' moms, told them, hey, don't tell the kids, this is what we're doing. She will have a mask on. Will your child have a mask on? She won't have cupcakes. If she does, it's already prepared. If I would have told her that, and Ragan, you know this is true, and you as well, Jen, some of the youth are like, nobody want to do virtual. This is getting old. This is getting, they're not feeling it. But truly, she was so happy. She said to me, Mommy, she didn't even put her music on connected to the iPhone through the radio. She was like, this is just like a relaxing ride. And I had so much fun. And her friends, I never asked them to do gifts or anything. We're forgetting that our children, even though they live in this virtual technical world, just like we do, what you said, Ragan and Jen, we all need connection, right? And so I was looking at her yesterday and she was so excited. Her friend made a card on a big poster board and she was so happy about that. So what I'm finding is we can still create things for our children to do, but for ourselves as well. And what I really want parents to think about, there's an opportunity now for you to connect on a much higher level or at a different level with other parents that are feeling the same thing, that actually have time to do it, because we generally don't have time to meet and greet. And there are virtual support groups out there. Or lastly, I would say, think of creative things for yourself too. For the children this year with our Federation chapter and with the Dekalb Community Service Board, I created a virtual spring break guide. And there were things that the families could do, the kids could do. But I was just talking to a friend the other day, and she was really stressed out. And I said, hey, when is a good time we can meet and talk? And I know she was like, what do you mean? I said, we can meet at a parking lot and we can face each other on our phones and we can talk. So making sure too that the parents are dealing with their grief and their loss by still keeping connections, because we are very innovative individuals. We just have to use that technology to work together.
And the situation is helping us be better parents in the way that our kids are learning about disappointment and about uncertainty and about that, they may be used to growing up in an environment where their parents can manipulate things to meet needs and to satisfy desires. And now those things are beyond the parents' grasp. So it's an interesting lesson beyond that. I'd like to ask the people listening, I guess, the people in the audience, is there something, I think Jen is going to post a poll in just a minute or two, but I was curious if you felt like the stamina for anxiety is being sustained. My point is about the beginning was we've had 2 months of going through this. So is anxiety being exacerbated by the duration, or is it being mitigated by the duration? Is it heightening, or is it becoming less so because we're now in this 2 months of daily routine and so the energy around that anxiety might be a little more diminished. So, Jen, what do you think?
I want to touch on something that Teresa said. It's been interesting to have individual FaceTime conversations with some of my teens who've reached out to me, definitely in a mental health crisis during this time. Hey, I can talk to you, right? As a trusted adult. Yeah, of course you can, right? So it's been interesting that they have the view of my home and I have the view of their home. And it feels very informal for them, opposed to my typical lifestyle, just like Ragan and Teresa. You're this body of person that they trust, but it's in that avenue. And now coming out of this, I'm a real person with a real house, and
you go grocery
use
shopping.
the bathroom. Yes, teachers use the bathroom and eat food. So, it's been interesting.
Sometimes.
Sometimes when you have time.
If you have time, right?
Yeah. But something I think about is when your mom would tell you, yeah, I know you want the fruit snacks, but all we have are apples. I'm finding the kids are doing things just to have either an interaction or be out of the house that they would never do. Right. I will go hiking, or I set up a tent in my backyard just to go camping with my friends and have a virtual camp out. they're desperate. And so now they're tapping into things that may become future hobbies that they had no idea and would have never interested them before. When I hear a kid say, I don't want to watch TV anymore. I'm sick of TV. I hate the TV. Take it out of my room. I'm done with it. We're in a new era. And I don't know if any of your kids are experiencing, I'm done with TV, either outwardly or inwardly. But when I heard a young person say that, I definitely knew we were charting new territory.
Gotcha. So, okay, Jen is going to report back on a poll she just put out to the group to listen. So again, use the Q&A if you have questions that are specific to you, because I think that we're all living in a very specific personal environment, and these things that everyone's talking about are generalizations in a lot of ways, but we're living our own unique experience. So if you've got something specific you'd like one of these folks to speak to, so please do that. One thing that the mantra I hear is for behaving during right now is gratitude, kindness, patience. These are the three things that we have to lean on and we have to become stronger at to get through this. So with gratitude, kindness, and patience, in your populations, are you seeing, could you use those three words to say that that's how your population is going? Or do you have a couple of other words you want to put in that three-way phrase? Teresa, what do you think? How is your population?
Well, parents, a lot of parents I talk to, they are grateful that they have shelter in place, meaning they have, a home to go to, and their children as well are realizing to be grateful for the basics, because our children are used to being able, just living life. They're eating, whatever. And now they're like, what do you mean, Mom? We only have 4 rolls of toilet paper left, right? So I think that gratitude and patience is being there, is playing out and is happening. People are thinking about their neighbors. I've had women, because I live in the Scottsdale area and I do a lot of stuff for Clarkston. I have women that live in areas where they're more refugee families, and they're like, hey, Teresa, can you call the school, the school system, and ask about, the free meals for that particular area or whatever. They're thinking about other people. That's kindness. We are usually so busy, we don't have time to think about our neighbors. We don't have time to think about the world, but it's right in front of us. So I'm seeing that. But particularly over the last week or so, when I'm asking parents how they're doing, they're like, oh, I'm getting frustrated.
Okay.
They're getting frustrated. Let's be real. There's only so much patience some people can have. So it's redirecting them back to being patient.
Okay.
So I think that is one of the concerns that we're having, is that people are getting frustrated. So I'm reminding parents, and they're reminding themselves to be patient with themselves, because some of them are like, well, is this going to be all summer? Now they can't go to camp. What am I supposed to do? Jen said earlier she had a friend with 5 children. I was working with a mom with 5+ children. She's going berserk over there. So I think patience and gratitude is there, but frustration is there as well. And so we need to take that patience and that gratitude and all those good things and see how we can help them, overcome that frustration. So what I'm finding is a lot of frustration, but at the same time, people being grateful for what they have, but reminding them to use patience and gratitude as a coping skill.
Gotcha. Okay. So Jen just posted the results of the question, which was, does anyone in your household experience chronic anxiety? And it was 59% said yes, 41% said no. So I think that speaks to, kind of an expectation. But she also asked, has sheltering in place made the anxiety better or worse? It was almost evenly divided between worse and no change. So what that says is that there's not, there's no movement towards the better. Although Ragan said that she felt like some of her anxious kids were feeling a little calmer about it. But
Some,
that's
yeah.
some, yeah. And that speaks to the, the people listening.
Mm-hmm.
So Ragan, would you say that what you're seeing is these aspirations of being grateful, being kind, being patient? Where are they being tested on this? Or what's another word that might be really reflective of the...
I mean, I think Teresa said it really well. Like, I do think that grace might be a good word to add to the mix. I was searching today for a word that means like, I don't even know. I'm sure there's a word, but like my parenting pandemic brain is like, what is the word? I can't think of it, but the word, it's when it's like when a dog bites or snaps, like, "Ah!" And then later on you come back and the dog comes back and tries to like make things better it's like that. I don't know what the word is for that. But understanding, it brings to mind grace for me because what my message has been to my kids and my parents is really like, give yourself and your child permission to get it wrong. And as a means to learn, as a means for growth, like, you are a human, I am a human, and we don't always get it right. In fact, we get it wrong a lot. And to make that be okay, and to model that as a parent, like, I messed up. Here's what I wish I had done differently. Here's how I feel. Like, our talk about, counselors talk a lot about I statements. I was feeling frustrated when you were giving up on that math assignment instead of pushing through. I wish you would fill in the blank. I wish you would not give up. I wish you wouldn't come to me and argue with me when I'm trying to help you, or whatever the case may be. So I think I'd like to add in grace. My wish is grace. I'm going to sprinkle grace, right? Because, I'm in that same I place myself in that same category. I agree with Teresa. The frustration is coming through. We're in this now for a while, and there's not a clear end in sight.
So I've got a couple questions coming in, but I do want Jen to use the 3 words that she used in an email to me today and sent me a video from a TEDx, a 9th grader at a TEDx event. So I'm going to let you speak your 3 words and see if that resonates with, if it feels like good advice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I loved how you phrased that it's good kids speak, and it's embrace the suck. And that's the new mantra for, I think, a lot of athletes and a lot of current or former military folk that go through really, really tough, rigorous conditioning in life. And the way I look at this is our conditioning time. And we're here to challenge ourselves in the ways that we may feel weak, and take that time to strengthen ourselves, whether it's mentally or physically or emotionally, any of those categories. It's okay to have those weaknesses come out so we can see them. We know they're present. This is going to take us to the edge.
Yeah.
And how we back off from that edge, I think, is what's the most important thing to focus on.
Right.
And so when I say embrace the suck, I mean that. In terms of, yes, this does suck. It's okay to say that it sucks. And it's okay that we have to live in it while it's sucking. And figure it out.
I want to jump in real quick if I can, Peter. Like, I really like what Jen said. I want to kind of hone in on something that she said, and that is like I would call it like naming the thing, naming the feeling, right? It's okay to say, like, all these, whatever the emotion is, to name it very intentionally, and to recognize that it sucks, and then talk about, like, is there anything we can do about it? Is there anything, do we just need to sit in the suck? Because sometimes we just need to sit in the suck, right? And sometimes we're done sitting in the suck, and now we need to figure out, like, what are the things that I can do, that we can do, that you can do to address some of that. And there's no magic pill, or there's no magic wand, but there are things that we're not hopeless and helpless. Kids and adults and humans are very resilient. And so what can we do? What are some ideas?
Right. No, I think you're absolutely right. Is to sit within it, sit with it. And see what it is. Now we have a question that came through, and I think this is this speaks to something that the panelists have talked about, and we have talked about in the past. How does a parent engage with their kid without it seeming like they're putting more pressure on their kid? So one of the questions that came through is, how do I provide support for my daughter who is 16 and she's a great student? I don't know how to provide support and not seem like a helicopter mom at the same time. So I need to find the middle way. My tendency has been to let her do her own thing as much as possible. But is this too much? So I think there's that, it's that how do you engage without it feeling like it's an added pressure? Who wants to speak to that? Ragan, you deal with students, I guess, and parents. So is that a place for you? Or Jen, do you have something you want to jump in on?
Yeah, I think this is, first, it really, I caution us to go away from what we have as a typical dynamic in our household. So my question usually to parents is, what would a pre-COVID interaction look like in terms of support? What is it? What is your normal? Was that comfortable, too much, or too little then? Because I do feel like testing the waters with new things could be okay. You know, maybe this is a time that you get to, like Ragan said before, have a better connection and have more of a connection and be more involved. And maybe this is a time that you back off and let there be a little bit of freedom to have successes and failures. But as long as they know that you're there, okay, do this, try it. If you fail, I'm here. I've had similar experiences in my life, and maybe I can offer some help or find some resources, or maybe you can. I do understand the not wanting to be a helicopter parent, but still wanting to be involved for sure. So I'm not sure that my answer really helped. It was more digging to try to figure some more things out.
Well, I think what you were saying is that if we abandon normalcy, even though we're not in a normal situation, then we're abandoning the things that we always trusted or we always felt confident about. I think it is an opportunity to test new things, but you can also disorient by testing, I think, and not relying on the things you're used to in some ways. Ragan, do you have something else to add? Because again, you work with parents, and you're working with a lot of helicopter parents, I'm sure.
I think parenting is often hunting for, like digging, clawing your way somewhere to find that balance, right? And I think if we pay attention to the reactions that we get and, and our intentions and try to find that balance. I don't even know if that makes sense, but like if I typically let my child, kind of handle her own business, and she's successful, awesome. That's working for her. Do I feel like it's working for me? I don't know. Do I need to have a conversation with her about like, listen, I really am interested in what you're doing. Can you let me in a little bit? I just want to know how things are going. If you change something and you get a huge blow up pushback, sometimes that's just the nature of adolescents and teenagers. So you kind of have to play with that too. But sometimes maybe it's because that was too far, like we're always looking for just the right amount. And if we go too far, usually our kids will let us know. So I don't know. It's balance. I struggle with balance too. I struggle with finding, what is the right amount. I think that often actions speak louder than words when in life and in parenting. So, my message to my own kids and to my students is like, I love you just the way you are. And I want you to have, opportunity available for you. And so that you get to choose which door you open and which door you close instead of somebody else. Right. And so if I can show them, if I can say those words, but also show them like, I love you even when you make mistakes. What does that look like? Or I love you when, you're not always doing the right thing. I don't know. So I don't know if I have an answer. That's a hard one.
It's a hard one. I agree.
Teresa has an answer, maybe.
Yeah.
Well, I want to get on to, we've had two questions about screen time.
And I was going to answer screen time in my answer as well.
Okay, well, here's the question that came through, and let's see how we can relate to that. So one of the attendees says, my 15-year-old son connects with his friends through gaming at least 4 to 5 hours a day. Is that healthy? I'm working and need him to be fairly self-sufficient. So are there suggestions for other types of connections to encourage him to make on his own? So we do know that the phone and video gaming is a way for connection to happen, but then it plays into screen time. So Teresa, what do you think?
I think that question goes hand in hand with the other question. As a parent, how much do you get involved? First of all, as just for us, a lot of times I always tell parents they're the expert in their children, and sometimes you become an expert in different things with your children depending on the amount of time you have with them. So in regards to the screen time, just like the question about her schoolwork, you have to know your child. So we need to make sure we're thinking about how our child learns as well. So for instance, we all learn differently. So my daughter can get sucked into her iPhone, her iPad. She is a self-advocate. She'll tell you she experiences some attention things, but she gets all A's and B's. But we have to do what Ragan said. We need to maybe set aside some time beforehand, set some expectations, let them set their own expectations, let them talk about why they're going to be on the computer, why they're on the phone, and then you give them boundaries. Because just like Jen said, hopefully in our regular everyday parenting, you're using things such as boundaries, rewards, and consequences. And so I am a blended family. So I have an ex-husband, I have a husband, we have 2 homes, all kinds of things. My ex-husband, my daughter has every updated iPhone, every time it updates, every iPad, and he didn't think anything was wrong with being on the screen as much. But now that she's over there more, he's like, she's on here all the time. So I told her, I gave her some expectations. I need to see what your grades are by the end of the week. Where are your grades? If your grades are not a certain way, as parents, you can control your child's apps. You can control your child's phone. Find those applications. Actually, I'll send you a list of them if you need those, so that you can set some expectations for them. But they're teenagers, so you also let them talk to you about maybe 3 hours is good for him, but maybe he breaks it up and for an hour he goes and does something else with a sibling, or go reads or does some work. But 3 to 5 hours is a lot of time. But as a parent, just being honest, we are working and we are trying to keep them occupied. But just the regular parenting, set expectations, create boundaries, listen to your children, and parent your child as if you're the expert. And the way you become the expert is by communicating with your child.
Yeah, and I think if I can read into that question a little bit, I think what the person was asking was, it does provide that connection that each of you have said has been important, and and our teens are craving. So it isn't screen time without a purpose. 6 months ago, 3 hours of screen time might have felt, might have felt isolating. But it sounds like this kid is using 3 hours of screen time to feed his need for connection. So can we, do we think that that's, we get a pass for that because it is serving a way to connect that they don't have right now?
If there are breaks, I think if there are breaks, it is okay. Sorry, Jen. If there's breaks,
no, great. Go for
I think it's okay. If it's continuously 3 hours, maybe if there are breaks, or he might have screen time. For instance, maybe he's in some other groups. A lot of teachers are doing Zoom, but I don't know, Jen, if you guys, with your youth development, if you guys are doing some Zoom activities with your youth, or some virtual activities, or maybe, if they go to church, just something away from staying in the same activity continuously, taking a break, maybe 15 minutes, and something of that nature, because they would need a break perhaps.
Yeah.
Well, I think what this goes to show is all we ask of our kids is to get A's and B's and be good students and go to their sports. that there really are no household responsibilities, there are no family responsibilities. And so how do you spend your day when your Zoom call was over at 9 a.m. with school? How do you spend your day if you're a teen and you can't go anywhere? You know, that does beg the question, what are we, really, this is the question for me, as this is my job to help support the community, is while we're in this and we're coming out of it, how can I create an environment that helps these kids have more responsibilities in their life, that they're not solely relying on being a student as their responsibility? Because you're right, how would they fill that time if they don't have hobbies, if they don't read, if they're not sewing, if they're not doing all kinds of activities that would distract you during that time? It would be just a lot of sitting and thinking. So I think that's a really valuable question. Are connections really necessary for 5 hours in the day? Do you need to connect with people for 5 hours in the day, or is that your coping mechanism for dealing with the stress and the anxiety? Right. So I would think the underlining issue to you needing to connect with for 4 or 5 hours could possibly be that there are not these other things to fill you up, that you're relying on people to fill you up.
Okay.
I would also challenge, I would challenge us to think more about what else, how else can that child find connection, right? So, and maybe there are other virtual ways too. Maybe it's not just through video games, but I think, like Teresa mentioned, is there, are the teachers offering a virtual tutoring session, which doesn't sound cool, but my son signed up for a book chat with his ELA teacher because he was like, I want to see everybody in my ELA class. You know what I mean? And I can talk about the book, sure, but it was a lot about the connection piece. So what are other ways? Can they do a Netflix viewing party? Can he, like, besides video games, is there other ways to connect?
Yeah. I think that's a great point. I know my 13-year-old has Netflix viewing parties with their friends. So it isn't, I think the answer to the question is honoring the connection, the need for connection, but maybe encouraging creativity in how they connect with their friends, even if it is across a device. Maybe it's in a different forum, it's a different activity. I think that's fair. So the poll came in. The last one was, how is your family managing extra time together? 38% says we have worked out a daily schedule together, which could be just about anything, but that's great. Working things out is an issue. That's awesome. We're winging it day by day and are okay with that, says 63%. So that's a group that, obviously feels confident with the spontaneity of what happens during the day. Small percentage says we're winging it day by day and it's not going well. And that's to be expected, because that's you're untethered from expectations probably, and it can be hard. 31% said, "What day is today?" And I do have to, when it gets to the middle of the week, I do have to ask my children for, is it really? Yeah. I thought it was Wednesday for most of today. And so I think it's an interesting, real thing, right?
Yeah.
Right? It's like it's your vacation orientation.
Yeah.
There's certain boundaries of time and space that you don't pay attention to. 44% says too much TV. 19% says too many video games, and 19% says, when is the last time we showered?
Oh, I love the very last one.
Yeah, I think each of one of us, it sounds like, really ramped up for this. This is date
we did.
This is right.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Lovely. And we had one person who sent, if you can see this, some teens have started to take up a way to connect with friends via old-fashioned voice-only phone calls.
So cool.
I love it.
I didn't know that. None of my kids have told me that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's charming, isn't it?
It is.
I like that it's old school.
Yeah.
Yeah. Talking on the phone without FaceTime, without an app.
Yeah.
So we're gonna get close to wrapping, because I think the last thing I want to just if there is I want to combine two questions that I had given the panel to prep for. One is there something interesting that maybe somebody hasn't heard before that you've heard is a great creative way to cope with this open time? Is there some activity you heard of that surprised you that you want to pass along this idea? And if you don't have that, is there one or two phrases you would like to offer as words of encouragement that kind of summarize your view on how we're dealing with dealing with right now? So either a creative, interesting idea you want to share, or a final word of encouragement. Teresa?
I think one of the interesting things, and it even goes back to the screen time and just interacting more with your peers, whether it be a child interacting with other children or adults interacting with other adults. One, I've experienced several virtual karaoke's, and they were really fun. So
Fun!
that was on Zoom, and I did one myself and some people, and hired a DJ and everything.
Right.
We had a live DJ, but there's a way you can set that up, and
Fun!
People are having birthday parties, all sorts of things virtually like that. So I would say just be creative in your way of thinking and what you can do. And then one of you guys said something about the watch parties. So we can even do, even as adults, as parents, we can do watch parties or date nights with our friends or significant others by doing watch party or some other things. So just using what we have and teaching them. And then going back to old school, just game nights, family game nights, because this is an opportunity where a lot of us may not have had the time to do things like that. And that takes your child you away from our lovely technology and be able to connect. So that's what I would suggest.
Okay, great. Jen?
Yeah. While on the phone today with the mother of 5, I'm going to reference that one of her children who is very much over her siblings and very much over the household has locked herself away in her room, and at the ripe age of 6th grade has designed a website and a product that she would like to come out of COVID selling.
Oh!
So I cannot wait to see this website. I think it's really fascinating that she went online, found a class for herself, and said, I'm going to learn how to do this. I've nothing but time on my hands. So I found that to be really creative. The other thing that I found to be really creative from some of my teens is, like I said, that virtual outdoor camp out. I mean, the weather's nice. If you have a little, even tiny plot of land, I know a lot of kids have hammocks these days, get outside, do a virtual camp out, make some s'mores, do something that feels really good in open air that's away from the rest of the family.
Great. Yeah, and it's not hard to make a website. You go to Wix and you can put a website together in 25 minutes without a lot of as long as you just let yourself do it. So Ragan, good creative tip or a word?
Well, I wrote down virtual karaoke, so thank you, Teresa. I can't wait to do some karaoke. My daughter, my creative daughter, is gonna love it, and I'm gonna love it. So selfishly, it's probably about me more than her, but I would love to do that. Mine is kindness projects. There is so much research out there that kindness, either engaging in acts of kindness, even witnessing other people being kind to other people, not you, or being certainly the recipient of something kind, really helps increase our own happiness and our own well-being. And we did a kindness week this week at school currently. So if your child goes to Renfroe, ask them about their kindness week stuff from Miss Hudson. But it can be really, really simple things. My family has been trying to come up with little miniature kindness projects every week that we've been out, because honestly it's so beautiful. And it can be simple as, like, I'm gonna call a friend. Actually I had a friend call me from college, just to check in on me, and I didn't expect her to call. I haven't talked to her on the phone in a long time, and she just called to check in. And I consider that kindness. I think, sending a picture to your friend of a cute dog, that is kindness. I think taking, my daughter's teacher, my fourth grade daughter's teacher, does something called Nice Ninjas. And when they were in school pre-COVID-19, they would just make little notes of appreciation for folks in their school, for anybody, and they would go and tape them to their door or their locker or their office door, and like, it can be so simple and yet so beautiful. And the power of kindness goes a long way. So kindness projects.
That's great. Yeah, I have found myself, I've heard from people that I didn't expect to hear from, just checking in.
Yeah.
But I've gone through my contacts sometime on my phone and just stopped on a name. It's almost like,
Yeah. The Wheel of Fortune.
The Wheel of Fortune, whatever name it shows up, I'm going to send them.
Yeah.
And
So beautiful. So beautiful.
Surprise, for sure.
Ragan, I want to add something for you. Because of my work with the Y, we are constantly connecting with our senior population right now that is
Yes.
And I would love to connect any of your kids in a meaningful way with those seniors that have
Great.
visitors, and love young people.
Love it, love it, love it. So let's talk.
Yeah, that's right. I'm in.
Okay, good. We would love it.
All right, I do have to ask, Kimberly Roberts is, if I can call her out, she had a question. Do you, but it seems like I'm not sure if you can get through. Do you have a question to ask? We'll wait for that.
She did write in the Q&A
Okay.
what she's been doing with her family.
My son is an art teacher. He's a great artist. Okay. Thank you for the video, Hang Out with Friends. Great. So the last thing, just before we wrap, I asked the panel to provide us with resources. So we've run long, so I don't want to get into any details because we will send these resources out. But if you could just say what the name of that resource is, the top one that you like, without explanation really, and just to tempt the audience to make sure they look at our resource list, and we're going to send those out. So Teresa, what's a website or a place, or you gave us a lot of great resources, so I can't wait to send those things out.
So the favorite resource I had was from the Federation of Families for Children's Mental Health, because they had a lot of resources there, but also they had visual resources, and resources meaning from small children to young adults. So a lot of resources and conversations to have with your children and your youth, as well as things to take care of yourself and make sure you're okay.
Can you say that one more time, the Federation?
The Federation of Families for Children's Mental Health.
Beautiful, beautiful. Ragan?
Oh, I love the open letter from our state superintendent. His name is Richard Woods, and he sent an open letter to the school districts, parents, and students and teachers. And he says, we must choose compassion over compliance. And when I read his letter, I was convinced that he was a former school counselor before he was a superintendent. And when I did some digging, he's not, come to find out. But then now I'm convinced that either his mother or father was a badass school counselor. So that's what I'm going to go with in my mind. And I'm also the emotional pyramid of needs. The emotional pyramid of needs, and the creator is Susan David, and it's lovely.
Okay, great. Well, audience, look for this to come out with the email next. Jen, what's your one-hit wonder?
Well, I really love being in, what did you say, Generation Y? So in the Gen Y.
You're Gen Y.
Yeah, and so I, of course, sent a couple videos. I'm a fan of YouTube. Kids get YouTube. They understand it. And so I sent a video that is called The A to Z with Coping. And it kind of walks you through how to develop coping skills, how to understand what coping really means. Yeah. And it's geared towards, I would say, a young population, not the younger kids. Maybe you could translate it. but more towards that middle school and high school age.
Yeah,
So,
but it's really bright and graphic. It's a really nice presentation.
yeah,
For sure. So I'm happy to share that. And the TEDx from I forget his name now, but Mr. Anxiety. The other video you sent.
Oh, yes. A young man with coping with anxiety. Yes.
Yeah.
I love that video. That's a great one.
That's a great video. So, okay. Well, I want to say thank you to everybody. I guess I can ask Jen Walcott, do you have any closing words to wrap us up here? Other than that, I would just say thank you to the panel for being here. And everybody who is listening is going to get a booklet of great resources.
Yeah, so what we usually do with any of our speaker series, which is now an online one using Zoom, we try to upload them to our website, decaturparents.net. And we have a YouTube channel where we take any video and link to that. And Peter seems to be swatting at bugs in the room.
No, I'm about to. I have to tell the chocolate milkshake needs to wait for 3 more weeks.
Milkshake, come on, people. Yeah, I wish somebody was bringing
Otherwise,
that one.
that's
So we're
Yum.
down to 21 attendees. We were at 36 at our top. We so appreciate all of you being here. I love how Lynn Adam puts on there, Owen Street's mom. I know exactly whose mom you are, Lynn Adam. I remember having Owen in 3rd grade at Winona Park Elementary. I love seeing all these families on here. We so love having our Decatur family online with us here on Zoom. And we expect to be doing more as long as you keep telling us what you want to hear about, if you like these, if they're helpful, what would be more helpful to you. We so appreciate bringing in these great resources, Jen and Ragan and Teresa. Last time we had 4 others. We just love adding all this family to how we support each other as parents. It's got its ups and downs. We can all do thumbs up on that. We know that. So I know that I will stay in the room. Peter will stay in the room. I think Dr. Huddleston might have a minute or 2 to stay in the room, and Terry will stay in the room. Some of our panelists need to get on to their next one. Somebody has another Zoom to get to. But if you want to stay in the room, ask us to unmute you. We can do that. If you need a few minutes, we will close it down, in the next few minutes. But if somebody needs to stay in the room, we're here for you. Otherwise, I'm going to say goodbye to everybody. We'll keep it open. I'm going to stop the recording now. So everybody wave goodbye. Just know if you want to stay in the room, you're allowed to.